Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. Heather and I just wanted to jump on here and talk about a topic that has come up recently, and we wanted to share our thoughts a little bit more and see if you had any questions about this. But we want to talk about vulnerability and how does that tie into recovery? At Real Food Recovery, we strongly believe that in order to move forward in our recovery, you really have to be vulnerable. Why? Maybe I might say, what is vulnerability? It's exposing ourselves to our feelings and emotions instead of numbing them, that we are willing to talk about how we truly feel, just open up to the most raw parts inside of us. And I think being vulnerable is actually a good thing. It's the most courageous, brave thing we can do to expose ourselves. In other words, say to the universe, you know what? This is who I truly am with my mask off. And how do I move forward from here? Because I want to be better. I want to overcome the things in life that hold me back. And I think I can't do it without being vulnerable. So, the beauty about Real Food Recovery is that we put you in a safe place to talk about these vulnerabilities. And we have wonderful leaders like Heather who are there to help kind of guide you and push you with all these emotions that are coming up, energy that's coming up. How can we move you forward in a safe way so that you can continue to be vulnerable and your true, authentic self at the same time? Heather, what are your thoughts around vulnerability?
Well said, Paige. Wow, there's not a lot to add to that. It was very thorough. But that word gets people's hair up sometimes.
Yeah, it's fearful.
And it's got to be because it's fear-based for sure. And I think about Brene Brown and how much traction she's brought to
Yes.
that word. And I remember when I first heard her talk about it, it was a good 5 or 6 years ago. I was blown away. And I try to live my life that way in order to live authentically. And really, authenticity is the opposite of addiction, if you think about it. Because
Yes.
when we're
Right.
authentic and living our truest authentic life, you can't be involved in addiction. You just can't. And in order to be authentic, you have to get vulnerable. And there's no growth without vulnerability. There just isn't. And one of the core definitions of vulnerability is being
Mhm.
willing to be open and expose yourself, your strengths and your weaknesses. And you need willingness to overcome addictive tendencies and patterns. It's all about surrendering to the process, and you need vulnerability for that. I know someone else that really talks a lot about
Mm.
vulnerability being essential for addiction, and that's Gabor Mate. I love his work and following it for years. And he talks about how vulnerability itself is essential, absolutely essential for growth. And there was something that he mentioned that I'm going to read what he said. A tree doesn't grow where it's hard and thick, does it? It goes where it's soft and green and vulnerable. That's where the growth is.
Mhm.
And when you think about it, I know for myself, it wasn't until I stripped off the veneer, shed that skin, and we just get down to the nitty gritty of who we are, then we can rebuild. And that's what recovery is about, is rebuilding and
I like
restoring and regeneration.
Mhm.
All of that requires us to get vulnerable.
Yeah. Don't you think it's gotta be one of the strongest traits that we could have is vulnerability? The s
Absolutely.
the strongest trait is being willing to be weak and expose
Yes.
yourself.
Yes, and I love that. I love the way you just framed that because when I think about it, I'm just a huge proponent of self-discipline.
Mhm.
And self-discipline is doing what's hard when
Mhm.
you don't want to do it. And I don't necessarily want to get vulnerable, but I know it's essential for me to get to the other side. And that's going to require some discipline, some self-discipline.
Right. That's a good growth pinches sometimes, right? It's
Yeah.
not smooth sailing. Otherwise, everybody would be doing it, right?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And I find the more authentic we are and vulnerable, then we find out who we want to grow with, those that stick around and stay and appreciate that. And that's one of their core values.
Right.
Because I find people that I want to be around, either friends, mentors, whatever, are those that are willing to get vulnerable
Yeah.
and they have self-discipline.
Yeah.
And now I'm leveling up just being in their presence. And those that are around me are leveling up just being in my presence
Right.
versus avoiding vulnerability at all costs, or they don't believe in self-discipline.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're going to have a higher quality person around you because you're going to be a higher quality person.
Well, and don't you think vulnerability swallows fear?
Yes,
Vulnerability, it's just
yes,
bigger than fear. It's when you say, I'm willing
absolutely.
to lay it all on the line, no matter how the chips
Yes.
fall. But I have to live my true authentic self. So it literally erases fear.
Oh, I love that because you just made me think about vulnerability is an act of self-love.
Oh, the
And
biggest.
we know that love is the opposite of fear and throws fear to the side.
Hmm.
And that self-love, you need that in order to recover.
It's interesting you brought that up because one of our members, well, several of our members have talked about the politics of what's happening in the world today and how it's induced so much fear, and how fear is at one end of the spectrum and love is at the other end of the spectrum. We can't do, we can't control world peace or world war either way, but what we can do to deal with all this ugliness is focus on love. And
That's
that
right.
may be just love for ourselves. What can we do to love ourselves more?
Yes.
Maybe it's paying it forward. Maybe it's doing a good deed, just swallowing up our life in love. And it makes this fear is probably not going to go away. So we just need to focus on making love in our life bigger so that
Absolutely.
proportionately it can diminish the fear that comes from what's happening in
Yes.
the world today.
Yes. I
Very
love that. I totally agree. And love starts with self-love first, because you can't truly love someone else until you love yourself.
yes.
You
And
can't do it.
And I was thinking about, especially in any type of addiction, but we work with people with food addiction, is you can numb with food or whatever your drug of choice is, or you can fill yourself with love. So
Mhm.
you've got two choices here. When you're
Yes.
dealing with fear and anger and pain, we can numb out, or you can just fill your soul with love so much that it swallows up everything else, all the negative, all the
I
dark,
totally agree because that's what the food, we're going to the food for, to fill that hole, that
right?
dark hole.
Right.
And food can never fill it. That's why it was never enough. And yes, the processed chemicals um, create this binging pattern that goes on, but it's also highly emotional as
Oh, yeah.
well. Highly emotional.
Yeah.
So it's driven by so many different things, and that's why it's so complex, this disorder. But I'm glad that we're talking about this particular topic because it is important. If we want success, true success and recovery, we have to get vulnerable. That's a requirement.
Getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes, that's where the growth is. We're not
Yes,
growing when we're comfortable.
that's so true.
And getting vulnerable is not comfortable. It's not. But I tell you what, on the other side, I feel really good. I feel good about myself. I feel good about those that I was able to get vulnerable with. I trust them more. I don't trust anyone who cannot get vulnerable
Yeah.
and who runs from it because they're
Mm,
not in a good place. I've been in that place before.
mhm. Good point.
So, yeah, I mean, it builds deeper connections with people. I mean, you look at movies that are based on someone trying to overcome a challenge in their life, and you watch them get vulnerable, and you just feel so much closer to that person
Yeah.
after. You
Mhm.
really do, and that's how I feel. I respect them more. I respect myself more. So,
You become the hero of your own story.
yes,
I love it.
absolutely, and conquer it.
If you guys want to know more about vulnerability, if you want to put yourself in a position where we can help you, find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4, the letter U. And we are set up to help people to walk the path through this to make the uncomfortable a little less uncomfortable. We can guide you. Thanks for being here, and thanks for being here with me today, Heather. You can find us more at Real Food Recovery. Thanks, guys. See you later. Bye bye.